Today's lesson is Rafael Nadal, Passion, Work, and Spirit. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Mike.
I'm not Roger Federer. I'm just Roger here. I wish I played tennis as well as Roger Federer because then I could be winning as many tournaments as Roger did. But in this particular case, we're not talking about Federer or Djokovic so much as we are talking about Rafael Nadal, the king of clay.
Absolutely. We've learned that he is a tennis prodigy, someone who is very talented, clearly much more talented than many people his age from a very young age. He won his first professional match when he was only 15 and his first Grand Slam at the age of 19. Since then, he's become the king of clay. He's won the French Open at Roland Garros every spring, more times than any other man. Currently, because Djokovic couldn't get into Australia for the Australian Open, the beginning of this year, Djokovic is leading the count for the most Grand Slam titles. He has 21, where his great rivals Djokovic and Federer are both stuck on 20. So even though he's 36, it seems that Rafael Nadal's career is far from over.
Indeed, and of course he's going to keep trying, but of course I think Djokovic is still going strong, and Nadal eventually will probably have to retire, but still, he's a hero in Spain, and we're going to continue talking about him in today's lesson. So let's do that. Let's talk about his problem with injuries. Let's listen to the first part now, and then we'll come right back.
Nadal's victories haven't come without a cost. He has suffered many injuries, from twisted ankles to wrist problems. However, his biggest struggle is the rare disease known as Müller-Weiss syndrome, which he was diagnosed with after he injured his foot during a match in 2005. The degenerative condition affects one of the bones in a person's foot and can cause chronic pain. According to his uncle, Nadal will eventually require an operation that will prevent him from playing competitive tennis.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 diagnose， 这个字是动词，意思是诊断或是确诊。例如 The doctor diagnosed Kevin with a severe respiratory infection. 医生诊断 Kevin 得了严重呼吸道感染。或是 The doctor arranged for the patient to have an X-ray so that she could diagnose what was wrong. 医生为那名病人安排照 X 光，好让他诊断哪里出了问题。另外把这个字字尾的 e 去掉，改成 is， 就变成了名词 diagnosis， 指诊断或是诊断结果。举例来说 The doctor found it difficult to give a diagnosis based on the man's condition. 基于这位男士的症状，医生难以诊断。或是 The doctor's diagnosis was that Sue had the flu. 医生诊断 Sue 得了流感。接着我们看到形容词 competitive，指竞争的或是竞赛的，像是 This year's school fair bake-off was more competitive than in previous years. 今年的学校园游会烘焙大赛比往年竞争激烈。或是 It's not easy to remain competitive in the technology industry. 要在科技产业中维持竞争力并不容易。另外补充几个和 competitive 有关的单字，第一个是 compete。C-O-M-P-E-T-E, compete. 这个字是动词，意思是竞争或是比赛。举例来说 The brothers are always competing against each other at home and at school. 这对兄弟在家和在学校总是彼此竞争。也可以说 Tim always competes in his tennis club's annual tournament. Tim 总是会参加他所属的网球俱乐部的年度锦标赛赛事。第二个是名词 competitor， C-O-M-P-E-T-I-T-O-R, competitor， 表示竞争者或是对手。例如 The company lost market share when its competitor released a new line of products. 这间公司在它的竞争对手推出一系列新产品时，就丧失了市占率。或者 10 competitors will swim against each other in the race. 10位竞争对手将会在游泳比赛中一较高下。第三个单字是 competition， C-O-M-P-E-T-I-T-I-O-N, competition。这个名词指竞赛或是竞争，像是 Luke entered the competition for fun without expecting to win. Luke 参加这个比赛是为了好玩，并不期待夺冠。或是 If you want to be in the dance competition, you need to write your name on this list. 如果你想参加舞蹈比赛，你需要在这张表上写名字。
Okay, so we're talking about Rafael Nadal and his many victories in Grand Slam tournaments and other kinds of tournaments, but his victories haven't come without a cost. So sometimes, of course, some things come with a cost. You win something, but then you lose something in the process, okay? So, for example, if you want to win a war, for example, well, it might come at a great cost. You may lose thousands and thousands of soldiers, but you still won the war, but it came at a great cost. Lots of things were destroyed, and lots of people died, but still you won the war.
Very interesting. He has suffered many injuries, from twisted ankles to wrist problems. You could imagine that playing a very tough sport like tennis, 9, 10, 11 months of the year, sometimes these guys have to play, traveling around the world, all the practicing, it is tough on your body. So he's suffered many injuries from things you might expect, from twisted ankles to wrist problems. So definitely, tennis players are faced with a lot of that. There's a lot of running in tennis, a lot of stopping and moving sideways. Tennis elbow is a disease, or not a disease, but an injury that has its own name coming from tennis. So this sort of thing is very common, especially when you've been playing so long and you are kind of getting to be an older player, definitely at the age of 36. However, we read, for Rafael Nadal, there's also been a special challenge. It says, however, his biggest struggle is the rare disease known as Müller-Weiss syndrome, which he was diagnosed with after he injured his foot during a match in 2005. Wow, so for a long time he's been playing sort of hurt, or at least dealing with this disease. It's not just an injury like a twisted ankle that will eventually get better. If you have a rare disease like this, it might be with you for your whole life, especially if it's rare, because this means it's unusual. So often science doesn't have all the different medicines and techniques to fix it because so few people get sick with it. This is known as Müller-Weiss syndrome. Now, when we see syndrome there with a capital S, it's used in the official name, the medical term for this disease. If you went to a doctor, they would say, oh, it looks like you have Müller-Weiss syndrome. What is a syndrome? Well, it's kind of a situation. It's kind of a chronic thing, the thing that will be with you for a long time, and it will probably affect you and other patients in lots of different ways. So it might not be able to sort of pin it down to this will affect you in such and such a thing. It will attack a certain part of your body. Depending on the person, it could affect them worse, better, a lot, a little, certain parts of their body, many parts of their body, which kind of makes it really hard to kind of deal with and to treat because every patient will be different.
Yep, in the world of medicine, of course, we've got all sorts of afflictions or diseases or syndromes that people suffer from, and it kind of depends on the nature of the problem, and that will determine the name of the disease, which word we'll use, whether it's a disease or a syndrome. And, of course, I think the most common syndrome is Down syndrome. There's also Williams syndrome and several others. And this is the first time I've heard of this problem, Müller-Weiss syndrome. And he was diagnosed with it after he injured his foot during a match way back in 2005. So, of course, a doctor needs to determine whether you have this problem or not. Then you can get medication or you can get some kind of treatment to maybe cure the problem or at least make it less comfortable. And so he had some kind of injured foot during a match. He went to talk to a doctor, and the doctor looked at it, took x-rays and stuff like that, and said, I'm afraid you have Müller-Weiss syndrome. So that's what a doctor does. A doctor will diagnose you with a disease. The doctor will basically determine what your problem is.
Yes, absolutely. And this is something that will affect him for a long time. And also from the next sentence, we start to understand that the effects of the disease will probably become worse over time. It says the degenerative condition affects one of the bones in a person's foot and can cause chronic pain. Wow. Wow, okay. So that's definitely a problem for a person who's running around for their job on a tennis court, and it's degenerative. So that's the idea that I explained. It will probably get worse because if something degenerates, it kind of breaks down and gets worse over time. If you don't take care of your car, the engine will degenerate, right? You have to fill it with oil, you have to change some parts occasionally, and if you don't pay attention to it, it's going to get worse and worse over a long period of time. It will be a slow downhill from good performance to bad performance. So this is something that won't get better, and as he plays and as he just ages in life, it will also start to get worse, and it affects the bones in his foot, and it can cause chronic pain. Chronic is a word I used earlier. Many syndromes in the medical world might be chronic in that you live with them forever. They're never really going to leave you. A chronic pain is a pain that you always have. It's not like when you fall down and bruise your arm, that will feel better in a week, and then 2 weeks from now, you won't feel anything at all. If you have chronic pain, it's kind of there for a long time, and you really have to manage it and sort of change your life to deal with it because it's not going away.
That's right. That's a risk you have to take if you want to be an athlete. You might suffer some kind of injury that will cause pain for the rest of your life. So, yeah, make sure you're making the right decision if you decide to become an athlete, especially a tennis player, because as Mike said, they have to run all over the court, back and forth, forward and backwards, and that can put a lot of stress on your knees and on your ankles and on your feet and places like that. And according to his uncle, Nadal will eventually require an operation that will prevent him from playing competitive tennis. So he's probably going to have to suffer from that chronic pain for quite some time. And then his uncle says that, well, he's eventually going to have an operation. And once he has that operation, it will probably end his tennis career. It will prevent him from playing competitive tennis. He may be able to play tennis for fun as part of exhibition matches or something like that. But as far as competing for a Grand Slam title, those days will be behind him once he has that surgery or once he has that operation. And if you're talking about competitive, that means you're playing to win or lose. Of course, you want to win and you get prize money and a huge trophy and stuff like that. But if you're playing just for fun, well, that is kind of competitive, but you're not really playing for prize money. Like in high school, I just played tennis with my friends. Yeah, we were competitive, but we weren't going to get a lot of money if we won the game. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the second part. We'll listen to it first.
Last year, Nadal's foot almost took him out of the game for good. After being knocked out of 2021's French Open, Nadal announced that he would not compete in Wimbledon or the Tokyo Olympics. He also skipped the US Open, allowing himself time to recuperate. After 5 months of recovery, he finally returned to play in the Australian Open in January 2022. The decision paid off, Nadal won, and his victory made him the player with the most Grand Slam men's singles wins ever.
最后第二部分我们看到单字 recuperate 这个字是动词，指恢复或是康复。例如 It will take 3 weeks for John to recuperate from the operation. John 从这个手术中完全恢复需要3个礼拜的时间。或是 Stretching is effective for recuperating muscles. 伸展运动对修复肌肉非常有效。另外补充这个字的同义词 heal H-E-A-L, heal. 这个动词表示治愈、痊愈或是复原。我们可以说 You must keep the bandage on until your wound heals. 你必须用绷带包扎，直到伤口痊愈。或是 Keep pressure off your knee to let it heal. 要让你的膝盖痊愈，就别让它承受压力。
Okay, let's continue talking about Rafael's career here, Nadal's career. Last year, Nadal's foot almost took him out of the game for good. So here we've got a phrase to take someone out of something for good, which means it basically ends your career. So yes, indeed, he's had problems with his foot, and those problems almost cost him his career. It almost took him out of the game forever, for good.
permanently, in other words. Yeah, well, after being knocked out of 2021's French Open, which was a big shock, Nadal announced that he would not compete in Wimbledon or the Tokyo Olympics. Well, absolutely. For a player like Nadal, who is the king of clay, the French Open, which is the only clay court tournament, having him get knocked out. Then at that time, it was quite clear to anyone who knows Rafael Nadal that something was definitely wrong. If he's not winning at the French Open, this isn't just he had a bad day. He's probably dealing with an injury, and now we know it could have been this Muller-Weiss syndrome. So he did the smart thing. He took a break. He announced he would not compete in Wimbledon or the Tokyo Olympics after being knocked out or eliminated from the French Open. And then he decided to continue that break. He also skipped the US Open, allowing himself time to recuperate. That's what you should do when you're injured. You should stay home, rest, stay in bed, get your health back. All of that, recuperate. So if the doctor says you have a cold, stay in bed for 3 days and, drink some hot soup, drink lots of liquid, but don't go to work. Just give yourself time to rest and to get better. They're telling you to recuperate.
And he'll probably have lots of physical therapy and stuff like that. And after 5 months of recovery, he finally returned to play in the Australian Open in January of this year, 2022. So again, he tried to stay home and recuperate. And of course, the period of recuperating is your period of recovery, which means returning to your original condition. And he was back to his health. He got his health back. He was back to good condition. And so he decided to participate in the Australian Open in January of this year. And the decision paid off. If something pays off, that means it's successful. It was worth your effort. Yes, he did make this decision. It was kind of risky. He could have injured his foot again, and it could have been even worse. It could have ended his career, but instead, he was actually quite successful. He was not injured in the Australian Open. In fact, he actually won the tournament, so his decision was successful. It paid off.
Definitely. It could have failed. He could have injured himself even worse, but no, it really did work. And also, as Roger mentioned earlier, helping it pay off was the fact that Novak Djokovic couldn't play because of his whole vaccine problem. So as we read, Nadal won. He won, and his victory made him the player with the most Grand Slam men's singles wins ever. So time is still going. All of these players currently are still active, even Roger Federer, although he's been taking a break. Novak Djokovic is still hungry for more titles, so I'm sure the numbers will continue to climb, but as of right now, Rafael Nadal has the most Grand Slam men's singles wins ever at 21. Amazing.
Amazing indeed. So that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's wrap things up now and move on to the third part. We'll listen to it first.
According to Nadal, passion, work, and spirit are what have brought him this far. As for what's next, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I'm enjoying every single day, he says.
Okay, so what does Rafael Nadal have to say about this? Well, according to Nadal, passion, work, and spirit are what have brought him this far. So he was probably asked this question in a press conference. Hey, what has brought you this far? What is the secret to your success? And he said, well, it's passion, it's work, and it's spirit. Having a lot of passion or love for the game, and of course, working hard, practicing for many hours every day. But you also have to have spirit, some kind of soul. If you don't have that spirit, you're probably going to be defeated fairly early on.
That's very true. I believe his big Australian Open win was a big win from behind. I think he was losing at the beginning of the match, but he never gave up. He fought through, and he was able to win in the end. As for what's next, as for the future, this is what you might get as an answer if you asked him. He says, about the future, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I'm enjoying every single day. So there you go. His passion, his spirit are still clearly there on the tennis court. He wants to win more. He's hungry for more, as they might say. So he's not too worried about it, but he's enjoying his life as it is right now. And I guess after he retires, he can just stay on the beautiful Spanish island of Mallorca, and that wouldn't be so bad.
Wouldn't indeed. It's right there in the Mediterranean Sea, and he's probably saved a lot of money, and he can sit there on a beach villa and drink sangria all day long and have gazpacho. That would be the life of a king, but of course he'd like to continue playing, and we wish him the best of luck, and that he can provide us with great excitement for many years to come. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分提到，纳达尔在2005年的一场比赛中脚受伤后被诊断出穆勒魏斯氏症这种罕见疾病。文中他用到 syndrome 和 diagnose 这两个单字，我们来补充它们的字首字根。首先来看到 syn 这个字首，它表示一起同时，带有这个字首的字大多含有那种相同啊、对等的意思。那么在 syndrome 或是 syndrome 这个字当中，它的字首 syn 表示同时，那么 drome 表示跑步。当其他的病症症状跟着一起跑来，这样应该可以联想到 syndrome 它有并发症状、症候群的意思。我们顺便补充两个有相同字首的单字。第一个是 synthesis synthesis， 它的字首 syn 表示一起， thesis 表示放置，把不同的东西放在一起合而为一，那就表示合成或者是综合体的意思。好，那么第二个补充的是 synchronize synchronize。好，那它的字首 syn 表示相同， chron 表示时间， ize 是动词字尾。相同时间应该可以猜测出 synchronize 它有同步、同时发生的意思。接着我们来看看 dia 这个字首，它表示穿越、跨越，可以指从这一端到那一端的两端之间，所以 dia 它有在点点点之间的意思。那么它也可以指说涵盖从这一端到另一端的范围，所以 dia 它还有完全彻底的意思。那么在 diagnose 这个动词，它是表达诊断嘛，那它其实是源自于名词 diagnosis， 它的字首 dia 就表示完全或是穿越。那么字根 gnosis 表示知悉、知识。同学们可以试着想，完全知道病情，那就表示诊断出病症了，所以这个 diagnosis 就表示诊断啊、诊断结果。我们顺便补充几个有相同字首的单字哦。第一个是 diabetes， 就是糖尿病的那个字，它的字首 dia 表示穿越，字根 betes 表示走，合在一起 diabetes 字面意思是 pass through。其实在拉丁文和希腊文中的 diabetes 表示排尿过多，这是糖尿病的症状之一。也许我们就可以用那种一直有尿液流过、通过的方式去联想到 diabetes 它有糖尿病的意思。第二个补充的是 diagonal， 它的字首 dia 表示穿越， gon 表示角度， al 是形容词字尾。同学们试着想，这个对角线呢，就像是从某个角度穿越到另一个角度。那么 diagonal 这个字当形容词，就是表达对角线的、斜纹的，它也可以当名词去指对角线、斜线的意思。第三个补充的是 dialect，它的字首 dia 表示跨越，在点点点之间，那么字根 lect 表示交谈，合在一起 dialect 就是方言。同学们可以试着想，彼此之间可以互相交谈、互相沟通的语言，其实在最早就是使用当地的方言咯。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Syndrome.This syndrome affects mainly women in their 40s and 50s. Diagnose. Rodney's doctor diagnosed him with high blood pressure. Injure. Rachel injured herself while rock climbing last weekend. Chronic. Laura suffers from chronic health problems and finds working difficult. Competitive. Reese has never been good at competitive sports. Recovery.Fortunately, my mother made a quick recovery after the accident.
Discussion starter starts now!
Okay, here's our discussion starter for today. What do you think of Rafael Nadal's decision to continue playing tennis despite his chronic foot injury?
I think it's very brave. That's what I would say about that, because it must be quite painful for him at different times to play tennis, so I think that's quite an amazing thing. Personally, I think Nadal's decision shows bravery, since he probably plays with pain much more than we know.
Well, the fact that Nadal continued to play despite his injury demonstrates that he's probably overconfident. I think he just got lucky there. I think basically if he wasn't so careful, he probably would have really injured his foot if he dares play again. I fear for the worst.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.